Good day and welcome to Resize Studio. My name is John. On today's tutorial, I'll be creating a texture portrait. If you haven't subscribed to this channel, do subscribe, ring the bell, like, share and comment. Let's get started. Click on File, click on Open. This is just one of the ways to open your document, okay? Now, I started working on the model a few minutes ago. I decided to separate the model from its background and make the background black. So I'm going to pick my model, that's why it's in the PSD file. I'm going to pick my texture. I'm going to click open. Okay, this is it. Now I'm going to move this texture down to my model. Hold your shift key to help you place it at the center. Press your Ctrl T to bring out your transform tool, and then resize to fit the canvas. Okay, I think this looks good. Now I don't want it this way. I think I'm going to flip it. So right click, flip horizontal, then press enter or return, whichever one. I think that looks good. Now I'm going to hide this layer. Click on my model layer, make a selection of her face. Now the reason why I'm doing this, I want to create two textures, one on her face, one on her body. So I'm going to zoom in so I can make a selection. Now to select the face, you could decide to use your polygonal lasso tool or your quick selection or your pen tool. Now if you decide to use your pen tool, and probably you don't know how to use it very well, I'm going to drop a link below. Click on it to take you to the the tutorial I created on how to master your pen tool. So pick the pen tool and then make a selection of her face. Try to make it as perfect as possible, as good as possible. Not really going to waste time here, just make a selection. Okay, I think that's good. This other part of it I could just select them this way, just anyhow. Okay, that looks good. Now I'm going to press Ctrl Enter to bring up my micro selection. Obviously, to change the path into a selection. I'm going to unhide my texture layer. Click on the texture layer and then create a max. You see it? Now you're actually not seeing my model. That's because I've not changed the blending mode to multiply. If I change it to multiply, then I could see through it. Have you seen it? Now I'm going to duplicate this layer. Sorry about that. I'm going to duplicate this layer. Then I'm going to invert this layer by pressing Ctrl I. Now once I press the Ctrl I, watch this. You see that the texture has been created on the body of my model. So I'm going to break the link between the both of them by clicking on this chain here. Click on the texture layer and then adjust it a little so it looks a little bit real. I think this should look nice. That was okay. So select the two layers and convert them to a smart object by right clicking smart object, convert to smart object. Okay, this is it. Now once you convert to smart object, it changes any blending mode that was there or that was used on it before back to normal. So all I have to do is to change this blending mode back to multiply. That looks good. Now the next thing I'm going to do is to try to wrap this texture around my images looking too plain. Now you could decide to use displacement map, which is the automatic way, which I won't advise, or you use the Liquify, which you're going to have to do manually. That I recommend. So I'm going to click on filter, Liquify. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. Okay, this looks good. Now if you're not seeing your model, what you're going to have to do is to click on this view options. Make sure that the show backdrop, make sure it's active, make sure it's marked. You could decide to increase or reduce its opacity. Now what we're going to do is we're going to drag the texture just to the body of this. I think I should reduce this a little bit so I can see through it. Okay, let's see. Okay, this looks good. So just adjust this. I'm going to try to do this as fast as possible, but when you're doing it, you have to take your time. Remember, from outside to inside, just drag the texture to be around the model. I think that looks good. So let's adjust here. I'm going to try to pack it in. Okay, I think that's enough. I could use this, so I'm going to click OK. Okay, have you seen how it looks like? It's looking a little bit better. Next thing I'm going to do is to create an adjustment layer to help me adjust the contrast. So I'm going to click on my adjustment layer, click on curves. Now clip the curve to the texture so it doesn't affect the whole background, the whole work here. I just need it to be on the texture, so I'm going to click here and adjust this a little bit. Try not to do it too much, okay? Just a little. I think this looks good, so I'm just going to close it up. I'm going to select it together, that's a curve layer, together with my texture layer, and convert it to smart object. Okay, remember, change this blender mode back to multiply. Okay, that looks good. Now I'm going to create a group, put this curve into the group, and create a duplicate of it. Now I need this to be my default, so I could just name it normal. Okay, that's good. And probably name this dark a bit. Now I'm going to double click here, and I'll be using my blend if to darken the image a little bit. So I'm going to drag the slider on my underline layer from the left to the right. Try not to drag it too much. Okay, just watch it as it does. I think this looks good. Now hold your Alt key, click on the slider to break it, then move it back to my right just to balance it and smoothen the whole thing. Okay, I think this looks good, so I'm going to click on OK. Now what I'm going to do next, I'm going to create a layer mask on this. Pick my brush, make sure my foreground is set to black. I'm going to zoom in a little. Now I don't want it to be dark on these areas, so I'm going to max it out. Make sure the flow is 100. Now try not to go outside of the chin, okay? Just stay around her mouth and her jaw, just stay there. Okay, this looks good. Before and after. Okay, that looks okay. Now I'm going to create a duplicate of this again, and I'm going to name it light. Now I'll change its blender mode to screen. Now notice the screen is the opposite of multiply. Now screen lightens images while multiply darkens images. So I'm going to click on screen. This looks good. Now if you watch, it's showing on the whole background. Let me reduce this a little. This is showing on the whole background. Now if I was using a lighter background, what I will do is I will make a selection of how I do this, but since I'm not, there's really no need, so I'm going to double click here. Go to my blend if, move from your left to your right. Okay, now if you watch, this really fit on her, so I think I'll move this a little bit back. Okay, this looks good. I'm going to hold my alternate key to break the slider and move this back to balance the colors. Okay, that looks nice. I'm going to click on OK. As I did before, I'm going to create a layer mask, and then I'm going to paint over some part of it. Just click here once or twice. You see what happens there? I'm going to reduce this a little. Okay, one sec. Let's correct this. Make the flow to be 40. Now click here. I don't want it to be much. That looks good now. Just this a little bit and just paint it over here. Over here. Okay, that looks good. Now what I'm going to do next is to create another duplicate of this layer here, and I'm still going to name it dark, but for what I'm going to put it underneath this. Now I'm going to name it very dark. I'm going to double click here. And I'm going to drag the slider to the right, sorry, to my left. Let's move this out a little so we'll see what happens. Okay, I'm going to break this. Let's move it this way. Okay, that looks good. Okay, create your layer max, then paint around half of the places you want the darkness to be in. Okay. Oh, sorry, I made a mistake on that. Let me redo this. Create a duplicate of this. Place it under here. Now, its blender mode should be screen. Good. Double click here. And then, let's move this out a little. Drag it all the way down. Break the slider. So double click here. It opens your blend if. Drag it from the left to the right. Think about here should be okay. Okay, this looks nice. Yeah, break it by holding the alternate key and clicking on it. Then just put it all through here. Click OK. Now create a layer max on it. And then paint around the dark areas. Okay, so this looks good. I'm going to reduce the size of this. Then I'm going to paint around her nose, just here. Okay, I think that's nice. That looks good. I'm going to reduce its opacity to about 40%. Okay. Now I'm going to create another one. Now remember, this is very light. Okay, create a duplicate and name it very dark. Now double click here, blending mode is multiply. Double click here to bring out the blend if. Let's move it out a little bit. Adjust this so I think this looks good. Yeah, it looks good. Stick it back a little. Okay, I think you prefer here. Break the slider and adjust it. Okay. Click OK. Create a layer max in it. I think you guessed that already. And then paint just on the nose. I don't need it to be anywhere else. Paint on the nose. Okay, I think that was nice. Okay, that looks good. That looks good. So I'm going to close this. I'm going to create a new group, and I'm going to create a layer. Make its blender mode to be overlay. I'm going to name this highlights. I'm going to make sure this is white, and then I'm going to paint so I'm just going to paint here just a little. Oh, sorry. I'm just going to paint here Now before you start painting, make sure this is white. Change its flow to about, let's say 5, and then you paint here, and that looks good. I'm going to zoom in, and then I'll paint along this area here. Okay, then longer chain, let's do that here too, and here. Okay, zoom out, just tap it here. Okay, that looks good. Now double click here to go to your blend ifs, then adjust this down to about here, break it, then move it. That looks good, that looks perfect. Change its opacity to 70. Then I'm going to create a layer for my shadows, so let's name this shadows. I'm going to paint black over it, so let's make the flow to be about, let's say 11. Now I'm going to paint at the side of a nose here. Now make sure the blending mode is set to overlay. Okay, looks good. So just paint it. So you concentrate on a little bit more. I'm going to get back to the nose. Let's just paint this areas. Let's darken here. Okay. Let's work on the nose. Now I want to work here, so I'm just going to reduce this to about 3. Then just paint here. Okay, that looks good. Change its opacity to about 60. Okay, that's okay. Now if you want to, you could decide to leave it the way it is, but if you don't want to, let's add a little more texture to it. So I'm going to reopen this, duplicate my normal layer, then raise it up. Now I need it to be above everything, so it's gonna be hard a little because I've already grouped this layer. So let's just move this guy here, move this right down, change its blender mode to overlay. Now it's looking a little bit awkward, but don't worry, we'll fix that. Click on filter, others, high pass. Now adjust this till you think it's okay, but try not to adjust it too much, okay? So, but I prefer to use 1 or 1.5. Let me say 1.5. Then that looks okay. I click on OK. Good, and that's good. That's good. Now, what I'm going to do now is you can decide to now leave it this way. But as I said before I started, I said I want to place a texture at the background. Now I would have created a duplicate of that texture before I started, but I kind of forgot. So I'm just going to reinsert the texture. So I'm just going to bring it back in, resize it the way we did when we started. Resize it. Okay. Okay, that looks good. Now I'm going to move it below everything, not everything anyway, below my model layer. Okay, it looks good, right? Now you could decide to add Gaussian blur to this, pass to the background. Now I'm going to click on filter, blur, Gaussian blur. I'm going to blur this a little bit. Okay, I think this is good. Now you could decide to reduce the fill and the opacity if you want to. Okay, I think this looks good. Does it? Okay, this looks good.